The US has enjoyed stable relations with Saudi Arabia with a steady supply of low-cost oil. However, Saudi Arabia and a group of oil-producing nations have announced a major production cut of over 1 million barrels a day, a decision that might cripple the US economy. The production cut was heard across the globe. And although President Joe Biden was quick to dismiss the move, saying it's not going to be as bad as you think, the news sent Brent crude, the international benchmark, from $75 to $85 a barrel, indicating things might take a turn for the worse for the US economy over the next few months. What's your opinion? Do you believe this move is a slap at the Biden administration, or Saudi Arabia's attempt to get closer to China? Let's not forget that a production cut might just as well be Saudi Arabia looking out for its own interests. April 2023 was an eventful month as Saudi Arabia moved closer to joining China-led Asian security and economic bloc. The Shanghai Cooperation, or SCO, is a club comprising mostly ex-Soviet states such as Russia, China, Pakistan, and India. The kingdom has been awarded the status of a dialogue partner in the SCO, but may eventually be granted full membership. But that's not the leading cause of concern for the US at the moment. It's the announcement from OPEC Plus and the consequences that will follow. Here's what you need to know about this influential bloc. OPEC Plus is a group of 23 oil-exporting countries that are certain the quantity of crude oil to sell on the world market. Mostly consisting of Middle Eastern and African countries, OPEC Plus was established in 1960 as a cartel to determine global oil supply and price. OPEC countries produce 30% of the world's crude oil, with Saudi Arabia being the biggest player, producing over 10 million barrels a day. In 2016, OPEC included 10 other oil producers to create OPEC Plus, and one of the new members was Russia, a nation that produces over 10 million barrels oil a day. Now, OPEC Plus represents 40% of all the world's crude oil production. Saudi Arabia and several Gulf states recently said that they were cutting their production levels by 1 million barrels of oil a day. Russia, a fellow member in the OPEC Plus group, announced that it would extend its cut of 500,000 barrels a day until the end of the year. This production cut by Saudi Arabia was largely criticized by the US. To comprehend the context behind this decision, it's important to understand the global economic relations between key players around the world. The war between Russia and Ukraine has forced nations to pick a side. And as the US backs Ukraine's interest all the way, it has placed other countries in cordial relations with the US in a precarious situation. Unfortunately, Russia isn't only the archenemy the US has to worry about. China's growing presence in the Middle East has alarmed Washington as the superpower continues to strengthen its bloc with Asian nations. China recently acted as a peacemaker between Saudi Arabia and Iran, two countries that had severed all diplomatic ties since 2016. In a meeting held in Beijing, foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Iran decided to restore cordial relations between the two nations and reopen embassies and consulates to ease the tension. Here's the reason why Saudi Arabia chose China over the US. It's not what you think. As US rivalry with Russia and China escalates in a highly polarized world, Middle Eastern countries such as Saudi Arabia intend to expand their global partnerships. A Saudi analyst, Ali Shihabi, says, "The traditional monogamous relationship with the US is now over, and we have gone into a more open relationship. Strong with the US, but equally strong with China, India, the UK, France, and others." So, while the kingdom is improving its relations with China, it's not endangering its position with the US in any way. Moreover, analysts believe that the Middle East will not act as an arena for the US-Chinese rivalry, mainly because Beijing is more focused on safeguarding its economic interests than playing regional politics. So, although Saudi Arabia is China's primary supplier of crude, its economy is pegged to the US as its oil sales are carried out in dollars. Besides the kingdom's dependency on global currency, the country's defense infrastructure also relies heavily on American equipment. What's interesting is that China has a strict non-alliance policy, which means that chances of Beijing involving itself in Middle Eastern conflicts are slim. And unlike the Western states, China also has policy of non-interference that keeps it far from getting bogged down in other countries' domestic affairs. Do you know how the Chinese policy benefits Saudi Arabia? Get ready to find out. The kingdom has always been on the receiving end of criticism from the US owing to its poor human rights records. With China, Saudi Arabia doesn't need to worry about appeasing or justifying its stance to Beijing. Interestingly, the relationship works both ways because, for China, It means that the kingdom will continue to ignore its treatment of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in the northwestern region of Xinjiang, something the US labeled a genocide in 2021. Over the last few years, Saudi Arabia's crude shipments to China have almost doubled, and during the same period, its exports to the US have dropped by nearly 2/3. This, combined with the recent announcement of OPEC Plus, has left the US economy in a lurch as the news immediately triggered a 5% rise in oil prices on international exchanges. This isn't the first time the OPEC Plus has reduced its oil production. During the pandemic of 2020, the group cut production by more than 9 million barrels a day. As nation went into lockdown, oil prices crashed with the lack of consumer demand. The recent production cut of 1.16 million barrels a day also follows a reduction of 2 million barrels a day announced in October 2022. When Russia invaded Ukraine, it led to a steep increase in oil prices, soaring to over $130 a barrel. However, by March 2023, oil prices fell to a 15-month low of $70 a barrel. But now, Saudi Arabia's decision to cut back oil production will trigger a rise in oil prices, pushing up petrol prices and the cost of living across the US. According to oil experts, oil prices could rise to a $100 a barrel following the Saudi-led cutbacks taking effect in May. The timing couldn't have been worse as the US enters the summer season with its gasoline demand at its peak. However, there is a chance the energy demand may remain curtailed as several factors are pointing towards a probable recession in the US this year. This is where things get interesting. If Washington doesn't secure a steady supply of oil, what benefit does it get from supporting the kingdom for all these years? Technically, Saudi Arabia and the US were never allies. Their relationship has always been purely transactional, with no mutual defense agreement ever signed between the two nations. Both countries were working for the benefit of the other on the condition of immediate reciprocation. For decades, the kingdom has used its position within OPEC Plus to maintain oil production and prices at Washington's approved levels. In return, the US imported substantial quantities of oil from Saudi Arabia. However, the recent action by Saudi Arabia highlights the evolution of its economic political policy shift that prioritizes Saudi interests first and foremost. As the kingdom has embarked on a highly enthusiastic modernization journey, it has become increasingly reliant on money and technical support from China. It's safe to say the time when American presidents could just call up the Saudis and ask for help in keeping production high is probably over, and the kingdom seems less willing to comply with the wishes of the US these days. One major reason for this shift is the fact that the US is no longer Saudi Arabia's most important customer. It's China. The kingdom exports a significant quantity of oil to China, and it will only increase in the following years as the two have signed several deals, tying up with at least 600 barrels of oil a day. Does this mean Saudi Arabia has become China's ally? Not really. It seems the kingdom is mostly looking after its bottom line, which depends on China's oil imports. As for the United States, its dependence on oil has always influenced its foreign policy, and the recent war between Russia and Ukraine has escalated geopolitical tensions, leaving experts to debate US energy independence all over again. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for updates. Until next time, stay curious.